All right, Bart, let's basically go to, 101 here. Explain your metric, please.
Sure. So the core of it is based on points per possession, offense and defense, like the net, like Ken Palm, adjusted for the strength of the opponent, the location. Um, so it's basically that's the core of it is that sort of adjusted efficiency. Um, and it has a couple wrinkles, which the main one is that I also keep track of kind of the average lead or deficit in a game, sort of a game control um, theory. And so um, the the theory behind that is it's hard to keep a big lead. It's harder to keep a big lead, and so it kind of rewards teams that can hold a big lead, and punishes teams that get down and can't catch up. So it's kind of a game control idea. Um, and so just as an example of that, if a team, gets up 15 points, let's say in the first 5 minutes and holds that lead for the whole game, they're going to get kind of a better score than a team that has a game that's tight the whole way. And then in the last minute, they're due to fouling, they end up winning by 15. In some systems, those might have the same kind of score. In mine, the one that holds the lead the whole game is going to be a little better off. And then one other aspect on that score is that I cut that off when the game is into garbage time. I stop keeping track of that average lead. It just stops. So that kind of it also disincentivizes kind of running up the score late in the game a little bit.
So, how much is yours data driven, like current versus predictive?
It's mainly intended to be predictive. So um, it doesn't have, I have a kind of a separate category, the wins above bubble, which is more about like a resume type of rating, which I know the NCAA is going to have its own version of. So it's mainly meant to be predictive to see like how good are these teams going to be in the future, and that does remind me that there are other aspects of the adjustments. It does count recent games a little more than really old games, and it also does discount mismatches. Like, if your games between really good teams and really bad teams just don't count as much. So it doesn't really matter a whole lot what happens in those games unless the good team loses or plays a close game.
How do you factor in home, road, neutral?
So just there's a home court advantage assumed, that's even for every team. So it's basically about it's based on the offensive and defensive efficiencies, about 1.3% of each. So that's the math of it. And it ends up being, like 3 points or so on average.
And then where do you factor in a neutral versus like a road?
Neutral is just there's just no adjustment. So that's just whatever the actual ratings are. That's what you get. And if it's at home, then the home team gets a 1.3% boost, and the road team gets a 1.3% um, reduction, or vice versa. So neutral is just kind of like straight ratings.
And so where do you start? What's your starting point? Some people use past data, some wait until there is data. What's your starting point?
So I have a preseason projection system which I put out, and that goes away about by January for the most part. So early, like if you go to the site right now, most teams have played like say 4 games. That's still 3/4 of what the ratings are. The main ratings is still preseason um, bias basically, and that goes back to the main purpose is to predict. So you can't really predict, obviously, without a preseason baseline at this point in the season. And they turn out to be pretty decent predictions because we know in the general vicinity where most of these teams are going to be, right?
And then how do you handle, um, let's say Team X beat a team in November, December, and they had a key player. And come February, that player's hurt. and that team goes south. So how do you judge that win at that time of the year that happened against a team that doesn't look the same now?
Yeah. So there's no adjustment specifically for that. The only way that would show up is, if the team starts playing poorly without that player, then that's going to show up in their performances, and their rating will go down, and those more recent games count more than that really old game.
But is that where sort of the subjective part comes in, when you're looking at a data point saying, well, wait a minute, I know they've got that win, but when they got that win, this team looked like this, and now they don't look like that. So I'm actually going to I'm going to add some weight to that win because the team now has gone south. Um, is that a thing where it's just hard to calculate mathematically?
It would be really hard to calculate mathematically, and certainly automatically. Like maybe you could do it manually, but keeping track of, like, just in the data, for instance, you don't know if a guy stops playing because he's hurt or because he got benched, that kind of thing. And with, you could maybe do it in the NBA, but with 364 teams, even if I didn't have a real job, I don't think I'd be able to do that. So, yeah, I mean, those are subjective judgments. And, I think there's an argument about how much to put on those. Like, in the NFL, where you make the playoffs based on your record. It doesn't matter if you played the Packers when Jordan Love was hurt. If you beat him, you beat him. Nobody did, but
So one last thing, the when you mentioned, and this used to be a thing, the last 10 games. I just want to dive a little deeper into that, about your emphasis on the sort of the end of the season when really the bracket's being put together.
yeah. So it's just it's not like a last 10 games. I think basically games that are over about 40 days old get demoted about 1% a day until they're down to 60%. So the games that take place on the first day of the season are always going to count for at least 60%, compared to the championship game of the conference tournament will be one. So it's never going to be less than half, except for the fact that if it's a mismatch, those mismatches get further discounted. That's how I handle those. Um, so it does, it is skewed a little bit towards the end of the season. There's a recency bias, and that's why I can sort of pick up on some of these things about, like, a team lost a player, or team's character, or a freshman, came out of nowhere in the second half of the season and turned out to be awesome. Um, but yeah, if it does weight the more recent games a little bit more heavily.
All right. Is there anything else I omitted that maybe should be in there about your metric?
I don't think so. Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate it, Bart. Thank you.
Thank you. Good talking to you.